Yeah, thanks for inviting me. It said on the thing that I was asked to talk about why there's so much bullying and midwifery and what we can do about it. I do have my theories about why bullying is increasing. I certainly think in the last few years, COVID hasn't helped. But it's about what we can do about it, because people have talked about it for such a long time, but nothing ever seems to get better. I'll just do a quick talk about what bullying is. I think that most people, if they've been bullied, they know what bullying is. They've experienced that feeling, and the percentage of people that have been bullied is really, really high. So bullying, although there's no legal definition of bullying, it can be described as unwanted behaviour from a person or group that is either offensive, intimidating, malicious or insulting. An abuse or misuse of power, which is very important, that undermines, humiliates or causes physical or emotional harm to somebody. And the bully might have this in a regular pattern of behaviour or one-off incident. It can also happen face-to-face, on social media, within the workplace, in emails or calls, and is not always obvious or noticed by other people. Bullies do tend to groom people, so they might have a little go at somebody, and if somebody doesn't retaliate, they know that they're game and they will come back and keep going. Usually the people that don't retaliate are people that have been damaged in the past, so that makes them a little bit more vulnerable. They don't like confrontation, and you see patterns of that happening all the way through your life. We know that it's mentioned in all the reports. It was mentioned in Morecambe Bay that there was a problem with culture. There was a closed culture denying problems. And the Ockenden report, which has just come out, has said there's a culture of fear and bullying stopped staff from raising concerns. They feared the consequences. So what we're going to do about it, I am going to just give you a very quick snippet of what happened to me. I've been a midwife for 29 years. The first 16 years, a clinical midwife within one trust. The first 16 years were pretty straightforward. I'm not saying it was perfect. We did have, every workplace has challenges. We had very strong leadership. And we did have dragons, but the dragons tended to be dragons towards everybody. They just didn't pick out one person and annihilate them, which is what we're seeing more and more. So the 13 years were harsh, and the two reasons that happened to me was I had a little sojourn to New Zealand, and when I came back, I was a single parent with 2 children who had registered disabilities, so I asked if I could have subtly changed hours, and that set me apart from everybody else. And it started then, but the real problem started when I started campaigning for to stop immediate cord clamping. And at the time, immediate cord clamping was routine practice, everybody practiced, and when I started saying this is wrong, there's no evidence, I was absolutely annihilated. And 13 years later of hell, I sort of escaped from midwifery into a quality improvement secondment. By that time, I'd been suicidal on a number of occasions, and I was medicated up to the eyeballs. Quality improvement looked at all my evidence and just said, they said actually at the time, you sat on £1 million here. But we decided that I could either do something about it or leave it. And the best thing to do would be to try and improve the arena, the midwifery unit for other people that were coming in my footsteps. So we took out a concern, and it was the worst thing that I could have done. Instead of all the evidence being examined, I was examined. And it wasn't the first time that I'd approached unions to help. I'd also done all the things that everybody was told to do. I kept the diary, I went to managers, I went to Dignity at Work, I went to whistleblowing, I wrote to the chief executive, I took out the concern, I collected all the evidence, and I was annihilated. I eventually moved trust, and it followed me. And then I realised in 2017 that I was not safe in midwifery. So I left. What did we do about it? I thought, well, if I can't do anything about it with the amount of evidence I had, I set up a Facebook group with a non-midwife, which is called Say No to Bullying in Midwifery. And the aim of this Facebook page was to give people a safe place to discuss their problems that they'd had and the bullying. And then we could hopefully create a tsunami of people who said no to bullying in midwifery. We have helped a lot of people along the way, and it's a very collaborative group. We have a lot of members on there. It's everybody sort of co-works. If somebody comes on with a problem, we do advise that people put them on anonymously, because we do unfortunately get voyeurs in the group, and we do get people that Photoshop things and send it back to managers, which in this case is bullying in itself. But what we do is, and we buddy people up, so you might have some Black and ethnic minority midwives or student midwives that are having problems, we can buddy them up with other people. And this ticks along for quite a few years. When the petition came out, Cheryl Samuel's petition came out in around September last year, and the March for Midwives, I decided to ask the question, why do midwives leave? So that we could support these two initiatives with stories to back up what they were doing. And I can only say that it was a tsunami of stories that came through. It was story after story after story. And most of these stories were, well, all of these stories were so traumatic, and we're hemorrhaging midwives, we're hemorrhaging midwives. And when you read all these stories, you can understand why. And everybody that comes to work as a midwife, it's not just a vocation, it's actually in your blood. You want to work as a midwife, you're part of the family. But everybody felt that they were completely dispensable. They'd have people like saying, well, if you don't like it, leave. And it's suddenly this tsunami of things that came through. I realised that we couldn't put these in the public eye. They were too personal. There were so much trauma in those stories. So what we decided is to put all the stories into different subsections, anonymise them, and I approached the Chief Midwifery Officer, which was Jackie Dunkley-Bent, with a small selection of identifiable stories, because we had to be very careful, because some of the stories were identifiable by the stories that they were. We got consent from their owners to anonymise them and share a small selection with Jackie Dunkley-Bent so that she could see the extent of the problem. Jackie Dunkley-Bent took this on board and has been really collaborative. She's on the back of that, she set up a task force, and health and wellbeing task force, which is her baby, so I'm not going to talk about that. In the group, the job was too big for me to take on. My co-person in the group isn't a midwife, and she's more like a silent partner, but she's been very useful, because we were asked to take the page down right at the beginning because it was seen as a conflict of interest with the RCM's Caring for You campaign. But it's completely different because it's a ground roots campaign that we work together. And it was too big for me, obviously, and I also have long COVID, so it was like, gosh, what do we do with all this? So we anonymised all the stories and put them into a huge Word document, and then we created subsections. We've ended up with a team of 9 midwives, and we've got a very tight group, and the subsections are why experienced midwives leaves and bullying culture. We've got why newly qualified midwives and students leave. And I have to say that the student midwives, the attrition rate is absolutely, from what we've read, and they were the most heartbreaking for me, because they've come in and you'd look at this story and you'd look at the profile of the person who was sending the story. And these are young kids. They're like 20-year-old young women who come into midwifery thinking it's going to be like call a midwife. And 2 years later, they're leaving their £20,000 worth in debt, and they're having to have help with their mental health. And I found those, I know that all the stories are horrendous, but I really, really found those very distressing. One example was a cohort of 40 student midwives that started, 11 finished, and 2 were practicing. And I thought, this sounds more like a thing out of the Squid Games rather than a midwifery, cohort. And the other one we've got is, the other subsection is workload and continuity of care, because we all know continuity of care is a fantastic model, and it's how everybody wants to work. Not everybody, but a lot of people want to work. But without the resources, it's impossible. And we had stories of midwives that were working in excess of 20 hours, or 27 was the longest, without a break, because they were doing community, then delivery suite, then community. And it was unsustainable. And then we had a conversation going about how it could be repaired with the continuity of care. So we've got different midwives that take on in each subsection and done thematic analysis of each one. We've included all the stories because we think that the stories, I see my position as a conduit of those stories. We're giving people the chance to have a last say in what happened to them that they've been denied before. And so we've put those into the subsections. Then we have a subsection of solutions as provided by the members of the group. And then we have got a little section that we're going to have on the unions, because the theme that came through was that there was a lot of talking the talk but not walking the walk, and we found that this was a common theme that needs to be addressed. And then we've got Mavis Kirkham has agreed to do a forward for us, and then we're going to put this into an ebook because we had 120,000 words in the document. We do have the resources. We've got 9 midwives on board. And then we realised that not only did we have to converse with Jackie Dunkley-Bent in England, but we need to converse with the education departments, and we need to converse with the chief midwifery officers and the education department in each country. So this is the Republic of Ireland, Northern Ireland, Scotland, England and Wales. I didn't at the time get consent to share the very confidential stories with the chiefs of the other countries. So at the moment, Jackie's the only person that's been receptive. She's got ownership of those. And we're in process with that at the moment. The document actually belongs to the members. And once we've got this document together, which we've got somebody who has also been bullied, she's providing the resources to make it into an ebook. We'll decide which way is the best to get this through. And it will be a joint decision with everybody that's on the group. Stories that we've had, it's so horrifying really to see the states that people are getting to. And I know that it happened to me, and I love midwifery, you know, and I think once you put your head above the parapet, or you become slightly different to anybody else, you put yourself in a position, you're not towing the line, you're not part of the status quo, and you put yourself as in line to be victimised. I found, particularly in my case, there was a mob mentality where you had a leader who surrounded herself with people, and you find this in every area really, surrounded herself with followers who wouldn't say they're sycophant, but they daren't step outside the status quo to protect anybody that's been bullied, because the same thing might happen to them. And you see that in social media as well, where somebody else will have a different viewpoint or will champion something else that other people don't agree with, and they will be cancelled out or annihilated. And it's this mob mentality which we have to stop. We seem to have lost the art of debate. People can have different opinions, and that's a bit like me with the cord clamping. So it's not really changed, because I said something at the time that was evidence-based, and a lot of evidence, but because I was saying something different, you got absolutely hammered. And it's not a new thing, this really, you know. There's a book called Willful Blindness that describes that, and I don't know where we'll go from there. The document is actually being very, very well received, and we are now actually working with NHS England Improvement Health and Wellbeing Directorate through Jackie, who have asked us to meet so that we can talk about some of the findings. We will talk about, because I think the other thing is that people on the group are all frontline workers. A lot of the time, you know, none of that filters down to the people that are actually on the front line. It sort of reaches the heads of midwifery or other people, but it never gets down to the bottom, so their voices aren't heard. And so hopefully our group will be able to help take something forward and hope to facilitate positive change. I don't know what we're doing for time. Let's have a look. Sue said to me about taking some go home messages as well, and I did write some down. I think really, what can we do? Because I think the bullying is such a problem. What can we do when all the other things don't seem to work? I would ask everybody if they'd like to join the Facebook page. You know, with safety in numbers, we've now got over 3,700 people. And I think that's the other thing really. Individually, each member has been bullied because they think that they can get away with it. But when you come back and you've got 3,700 midwives and students behind you, we're a bit more formidable. So we might be able to do something about that. So join the Facebook group. We do ask questions right at the beginning because we try to protect the members of the group. So the questions are really important so we can protect people. If you do post something, there is a way to post it anonymously on the page, or get in touch with me or Danny, who's the other person, and we can post for you. Write to your Chief Executive Officer of the Trust. Don't leave it with the midwifery officers or the head of midwifery. Write to your Chief Executive Officer, because they are obligated to listen and respond. And you can do this retrospectively, because no Chief Executive wants it. They may not know about it. It may be covered up. And I think that's a really good thing to do, because if they have a flurry of complaints coming in, maybe they will take it seriously. It is International Day of Action Against Bullying tomorrow, 2022. So please flood social media and raise the voices, because bullying it does need to be eradicated, or as far as we can, but we do need to keep talking about it. And this is an initiative that spread from Australia to America, and Say No to Bullying have come on, and Jackie Dunkley-Bent is supporting that initiative. So please do what you can to flood it. One tip with people that have been bullied, because I thought the one tip that I was told by a bullying expert is, if anybody says anything to you, it's really, you can freeze and you're not sure. And one of the things that I had said to me was once that you're too kind. And the bullying person said to me, what I should have said back to her is, what do you mean by too kind? You can say it really nicely, really quietly, but then it puts them on the back foot and they've actually got to think about them not being kind enough. And you could do that with anything. You know, if anybody said, ask them just in a non-confrontational way, what do you mean? Please, could you explain that? Because then they have to go back and actually think about what they've said and justify what they've said. The other thing that's important is that all of us have to reflect on our own behaviour and how we respond to others, particularly for responding in stressful situations, or we feel exploited or we feel bullied, and how we retaliate. And that's everybody's responsibility.